And it looks like we're live. So, hello, folks. I'm Steve, K5ATA. Thank you for coming by the stream. And today we have a special guest. Go ahead and take a second, introduce yourself, and then we'll just break right into it.
Sure, I'm David, NA2AA, and I'm the CEO at the American Radio Relay League.
So, David, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And we're not going to take a whole lot of time before we get started, but a couple of the obligatory YouTube things. If y'all would hit that like button down below, hit subscribe. I'd appreciate it. It helps the channel out, helps the Padawans out. Also, there are a few links down below if you want to help support the Padawans, which is, my group of kids that I teach at school. It would be much appreciated. There are several different ways to do that down below. We won't go into too much detail right now because we've got a lot to cover with David. So we will be taking some questions from folks in the audience. So, if you want to throw them in there, please by all means do. So, David, hams all over the world, they're curious. Who is David Minster? Like I said, thanks for giving us the time to get to know you. And I do want to point out to folks that this is more of a getting to know David as a ham and as just a dude in general. Not so much about ARRL policy and stuff. So we're going to try to keep this thing geared towards just you and what you like to do and stuff like that. So you and I have talked a little bit ahead of time, and I'm anxious for folks to get to know you. So why don't you take a second and just give us a little bit about you, and then we'll kick off with the Q&A.
Sure. So I've been in amateur radio since 1977, when I was in high school. I've been an active ham for most of that time through my life. I love pretty much every aspect of amateur radio. It feels sort of like a Chinese buffet kind of experience. You're able to go in and dabble and try whatever you want. And if you don't like it, you can move down the buffet, but you don't have to be critical of the guy that's eating something from the other side that you didn't like. So I think there's a lot there for everyone. Early on, some of the things that I got involved in with one of my first Elmers was traffic handling, and the New Jersey and second region nets, second area net, and then moved on up into sort of stumbling and falling accidentally into contesting. Was really fortunate as a teenager to be able to go to arguably at that time the biggest contest station in the world, which was K2GL in Tuxedo Park, New York. He's the very first inductee to the CQ Worldwide Contest Hall of Fame. And after that, and going to Ohio State, getting a degree in computer engineering, after that, a lot of the time that I've spent on the air has been in CW. I have a real passion for CW. Satellites have always been, since sort of the RS 10, 11, 12, 13 days back in the 80s, was always something that I loved, and I've stuck with satellites since then. But sort of moving through my career and getting the opportunity to come to the league at this point in my life was an absolute dream. And so I'm living the dream now. I get to meet and work with hams like you, Steve, every day now. There's just a tremendous amount of things that we've got going at the league, and I'm just having the time of my life.
So, well, great. So we'll go ahead and start off with the questions. First of all, thank y'all to everybody who's here tonight. A lot of the regular folks are in the house. I won't go through the list right away because, like I said, we've got several things we want to get to, but some people are already starting to roll some questions in. So I'll kind of take note of those, and if we don't address those at some point during our questions, we'll come back and grab some of those. So where are you from? And as far as how were you exposed to ham radio initially? Was it as a child? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I was born and raised in northern New Jersey, I've had a little bit of a nomadic life in sort of the northeast corner of the U.S. and into Canada. I got into amateur radio, frankly, because my father was tired of buying replacement walkie-talkies for my brother and I. So for my birthday one year, he got me a CB base station, and I got very serious into operating a CB. And this was even before the band opened up to 40 channels. It became abundantly clear that CB radio was not a place that I wanted to stay. So my father bought me a book called From CB to Ham Beginner, and I was absolutely hooked. So we went to the ARRL convention, which was in northern New Jersey in the fall of 1976. And we bought a Hallicrafters SX101A and bought it for $100. The guy told us up and down the thing worked. We got it home dead as a doornail. So here was a high school kid with a boat anchor that didn't do anything. So my high school advisor, who just in the past few years just passed away, Don Washy, W2DL, I was very fortunate that this was a guy who loved to rehabilitate antique radios. And I mean, from the ground up, he went through and just went after this receiver. And so it took him about a month and a half to really get the thing back to a good working state. So my father made me show some commitment by receiving all 50 states. So I kept a map up on the wall, and actually New Year's Eve that year, I received my 50th state. And so I got the green light to go and study for my novice, and at the same time begin collecting parts to build a transmitter, the transmitter that was in the book From CB to Ham Beginner. So I had that going on, and I had the ARRL's guide at the time, which was called Tune in the World with Ham Radio. So I taught myself Morse code in a weekend from the cassette tape that was there. I took my written test and was licensed shortly thereafter. So that was sort of sophomore year in high school.
All right, so I've got to ask, what was the 50th state?
The 50th state, as you can imagine, was Alaska. What I didn't tell you was I really didn't understand bands very well at the time. And I didn't park myself on 20 meters. I parked myself on 75 meters. So getting Alaska on 75 was pretty rough.
So my 50th for worked all states was North Dakota. So that's kind of my running joke is there are only 8 people or so, I think, living in North Dakota. So, but
well, I can tell you that that experience as a kid has made the Worked All States Award special to me. So I've gone after Worked All States every possible way that you can think of. I even challenged myself recently when FT4 became popular to work all states in FT4. I wanted to do it in a day. It took 3 days, but it was a lot of fun chasing.
So you kind of already answered the next question. So it was just kind of a love it at first sight kind of thing once you got a hold of ham radio. It wasn't, I teach the Padawans, I call them at school, and some of them it's pretty instant, and some of them it's a gradual thing. So, but
for me, the attraction was really sort of twofold. The first one was I just fell in love with CW right away. And the second thing was being able to work DX. I mean, the fact that my dad and I basically took a box of parts, put the thing together, put a piece of wire out the window up and over the roof, and I'm working all over Europe with about 20 watts CW with a straight key, when an old boat anchor receiver was like a miracle of science to me.
Well, cool. So let's see, what year was that you got licensed then? And what was that first? So 77, and that first license class back in 77, the structure was different then. A lot of folks are recent hams, and so
So it was novice, technician, general, advanced, and extra. So that was my novice.
And when did you decide to upgrade? I mean, was it pretty quick right after that you worked on it, or?
Yeah. So what happened was my family spent the summer in San Francisco. So I was licensed in, say, February of '77. We went and spent the summer in San Francisco. And while I was there, I again had the ARRL General study book, and I studied it. And the FCC, you had to go to the FCC at the time. They had a field office in San Francisco, so I went and took my general, crushed it, and the examiner said, "You know, you did so well on the general. Why don't you try the advanced?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't study for the advanced." She said, "Give it a shot." So I gave it a shot. Oh, I got crushed. I mean, it was like not even close. So, in fact, I think the advanced was, of all the amateur radio tests I took, it was far and away the toughest.
So, yeah, folks are asking, where's the ape? Something came up, and ape wasn't able to make it tonight. So, but To temporary offline is asking that in the chat there. So, so as far
Another YouTuber.
yeah, he's another YouTuber. So, as far as like your first Elmer, would you consider that your dad, or did you have another Elmer on the?
Well, I would say there were probably three people that were really important to my start in amateur radio. The first one absolutely was my father, who showed not just an interest, but I mean, a real encouragement, and did, the very best he could to, provide opportunities for me to grow in the hobby. And I'll give you an example. He was doing a project up in Albany, and a farm supply place was going out of business up there. And believe it or not, these guys had Roan freestanding towers that they were liquidating. So he bought a 32-foot tower, brought it home. I don't even remember how he got it home, but a 32-foot tower. And I went into the swap ad, I think is that what it's called, the swap ad press, and found a guy in the next town over who was selling an old TH3. I mean, this thing was just so beat up, but basically got the thing working, and went out looking at schools. And we stopped at a place, I can't remember the name, it was in Trevose, Pennsylvania. And while he had already done the research, we swung in and bought a Ham 3 rotator. So that tower went up. I had a high gain 3-element Yagi, and it was just like, it was amazing. But the second one was the high school advisor that I had. So very much in the way that you're getting students started. Our advisor, Don Washy, ran not just the amateur radio station, which was WA2UYB, with a whopping HW101 and a vertical up on the roof of the school. But we also, he acquired, I don't even know how he pulled this off. He acquired an FCC FM license, and we had a full FM radio station at 88.7 FM. So I wound up getting my radio telephone third class certificate so that I could be an engineer at our radio station.
Sweet.
Yeah, so he was a really phenomenal guy. And then the person who, I really credit much of my academic success to is my friend Mike Conwell, N2MW. We were real nerds in high school. We were sitting in the library doing these math problems from these Russian competitions, and it doesn't make you the most popular with the girls, but we did pretty well with our math SATs as a result. But Michael, I made my first contact at his house ever on a Swan 700. And Mike, somebody said to me once, why didn't he go for N2 Mike Charlie? Well, he went for N2MW because he was into QRP and was fascinated with running signals increasingly weaker. So he was into the milliwatts. And in any event, Michael and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of stuff with amateur radio for the sort of last couple of years I was in high school. And he was a phenomenal Elmer to sort of help me progress with the hobby.
Very cool. So, favorite modes, or what modes do you enjoy, or modes you've touched on and gone away from, and
it's almost like there's not a mode I've met I didn't like. Far and away, I love CW, and I think the reason why I love it, I know that there are people that struggle with it. I never did, but there's a melody and a rhythm, and everybody sort of finds their comfort zone. I mean, I love to listen to CW in sort of the mid 20 word per minute range, 25, 27 words a minute. And there's nothing better than, after a long sort of stressful day, going to the radio, turning on 30 meters, and just listening down in the noise and hearing somebody like 3 Bravo 8 Radio Fox calling CQ and listening to who he's working from his part of the world on 30 meters. It's and it's not important to me to transmit. When I'm in that mode, I really just love copying CW. But I love contesting with CW, and the keys go off the bench and the fingers are on the keyboard, and that's it. There's no keys for the 48 hours of the contest. And but I've enjoyed watching FT8 and FT4 come up. Again, I decided to chase my worked all states in JT65, one of the most painful experiences of my life. It's like, actively watching paint dry. It's so slow. But, obviously sideband, FM. I used to love doing AM with my Hallicrafters. Those big tube boat anchors just have the deepest, richest sound on AM. So I used to love to do that. But no, I don't think there's anything that I don't enjoy doing with radio.
741, he's also another YouTuber. He just said in the chat when he was single, he used to enjoy falling asleep listening to CW. So thinking it would sink in by osmosis, but it didn't work. So, all right. So there aren't any modes you don't particularly love. I mean, there's not one that you're just like, eh.
Well, I mean, JT65 just because it's so slow. I mean,
Yeah.
Other than that.
So, so your QRZ page, you've touched on it a little bit, talks about contesting a good bit. And if folks out there, if you have not seen his QRZ page, you definitely need to go check that out. So what was it that, obviously you enjoy it a great deal. What was it that drew you into contesting and whatnot?
Well, I fell into contesting entirely accidentally. And it had to do with chasing worked all states. I got on one weekend and the band was out of control. And I had no idea what these guys were sending to each other. And so I called up a friend of mine. In fact, one of my best friends growing up, who I'm still best friends with, Bob Nauman, W5OV. I reached out to Bob and was like, what is going on? And he was like, dude, that's sweepstakes. I was like, well, all right. So like, clue me in. How do I work these guys? So he took me through and gave me a little primer on how to work sweepstakes. And I got in there and I don't know, probably made a couple hundred contacts, worked a bunch of new states. It was really exciting. And then from then on, getting into the contest, it was a lot of fun. It was more fun for me to see who I worked sort of contest after contest. Being able with CQ Worldwide to be able to work rare countries. It's funny, during the week you go to work this rare country, the pileup is so thick it's hopeless. But during the contest, the guy can only work everybody once.
Yeah.
On a band, right? So you get in line on a Sunday and you can work them in like, a minute. So, but the thing that really got me the most excited was going up to K2GL up in Tuxedo Park. And we used to use the call sign N2AA, Gene Walsh. And Gene was a guy who taught me a lot about contesting, a very competitive guy, if you didn't know him. He just passed away in the last year or two, but a very, very competitive guy. And I fell in love with multi-operator contesting. I love the team aspect of it. I love the ability if someone is having problems or slowing down or whatever, you can jump in and help. And where it's evolved to, another one of my best friends is Noah, K2NG. Noah, who used to go up to Tuxedo Park, after Buzz passed away, he started going down to Bonaire and wound up buying some land up on top of what I call Radio Mountain. All of the radio stations' transmitters are up there. And basically, we have a station with what looks like relatively modest antennas, but because of where we are on an island surrounded 360 degrees by water, and because we're up so high, the coverage of these antennas is absolutely world class. And when we compete in ARRL DX, we usually win the world in our category. And in CQ Worldwide, we're usually at the top of the heap in South America, and we're competitive globally. And it's really it's a massive adrenaline rush. Sort of the 90 seconds before the contest starts, I almost can't keep my hands still, waiting to start calling CQ and get the pileups rolling.
I suggest coffee. It calms me down.
And the coffee won't. I could be going crazy on caffeine. It wouldn't help. The adrenaline would just wipe me out.
So having accomplished all that and won so many and whatnot, what is it that keeps you coming back to contesting? I mean, if you've won it several times, why do you keep going back? Is it just curious?
Well, I love the experience of team sport. So the fact that we win is fine. We don't, people say, oh, you have bragging rights now. Whether we win or we don't win, I mean, we want to win. When my K3 turns on, you'll see a message scroll across and it says PJ4G, we win, period.
So you just answered somebody's question in the chat earlier who asked what radio you run. So
yeah, I have Elecraft K3s. But it's the camaraderie of getting together, putting the station together. It's funny, right? The hobby is wireless. And the joke is you look at our contest station that we've all assembled for the weekend, and it's like it is the biggest gangly bowl of spaghetti wires that run about 12 feet across the back of this bench to get all of the positions together. It's just crazy.
All right. So you kind of alluded to it. You have K3s. Your home station. Talk about that. What have you got?
Well, right now, because I moved to Central Connecticut, they're all in Pelican cases and boxes. But I can talk about. In fact, you and Ape were talking about this when I was first elected. You were looking at my QRZ page. The way my station was set up at home is basically I had a single op 2 radios set up with K3s left and right, and then an MK2R plus in between them to control audio and mic and keys and all the rest. And it's got a fantastic sound card in there for doing digital, K1EL keyer in there. It's just a fantastic box. And then P3s off of each of the K3s for band scopes. I had an OM Power 2000 on the one radio and then a 10 Tech 425 on the other. So that was the HF setup. And then satellite is an FT847 and with an ARRL set up outside in the yard with SSB preamps and bandpass filters and everything out in a box at the antennas, and just absolutely love working satellite.
So somebody just asked, what about your field day setup? We're going to go there just because it's kind of contest, just even though it's field day is technically not a contest.
It's most certainly not a contest, right?
So
I would say through the years, I've been in and out of field day. I've been out of field day recently, and hope to get back into it now that sort of life is settling down. Hopefully we'll get past all this COVID-19 stuff this year. Maybe by June this year, things will be in a state where people can get closer together again and work field day. But one of the most fun experiences I ever had on field day was, again, my friend Bob, W5OV, called together a group of contesters, and we went up to the top of this mountain and, operated off generator. He drove a bucket truck up from his electrical business, and we put a tri-bander up on it. The site had a fire tower that was like, I don't know, probably 90 or 100 feet high that we strung inverted V's off of. I was early on was a big time programmer. I mean, I did it at work. I did it at home. It was like my total life. I wrote an application called Freddy Pack that ran on an old compact computer. And it basically sat on 2 meters for all of field day as a field day robot making contacts. So I forget how many we made. It was, I don't know, 80 some contacts. But we just left that thing to run for the weekend. And it just kept chugging along, making contacts on packet.
Sweet. All right. What projects are you working on now? I know you've been really busy, and there are some folks asking about what your plans are with the league and whatnot. So that's probably taken away from some of your project time. But
yeah, well, I can talk a little bit about that. The thing that I'm most excited about right now is it's creating an ecosystem for remote radio. And the guys that really have it right, it's a small group of people that are using an IBM Internet of Things tool called Node-RED. And Node-RED runs very efficiently on a Raspberry Pi computer. So at home and now at the league, we're creating these ecosystems using Raspberry Pi 4Bs for being able to treat the station as an Internet of Things. So you can have a green heron controller for your HF tower, a green heron ARRL controller for your satellite tower. You can control an antenna switch and put all of this up on, you can VNC into it with an iPad, a laptop, a desktop, whatever you want. And the thing that's amazing about it is you can do it from anywhere. So I've taken that love of remote radio and have taken it to the league. And we're in the process right now of taking the league as a club station, W1HQ, that essentially we're so busy working, we never get to use. And so what I said was, it doesn't make sense to have this real estate and radios tied up sitting doing nothing. I really want to turn the station into an extension of the ARRL labs. So what we're in the process now of doing is we've got a couple Raspberry Pis in there. It now runs on an independent network with a dedicated IP from the outside. We've got a Flex Radio 6600M. We've got an ICOM 9100. And what we're looking to do is to create an environment. You can think of it almost like a cooking show, right, on one of these cooking channels. You've got the test kitchen in the back where they're like testing a new blender. They're testing what canned tomatoes are better than others, right? But the real sizzle of the show comes in the kitchen, what did you make? How did you make it? How does the food taste? And so that's the philosophy, is we're taking the great work that the lab does on new equipment, and we're going to roll that equipment into W1HQ. And now we're going to be able to do two things. We're going to be able to commit it to real world operating environments. And the other thing is we can remote it. So we can get into that station off hours, basically to extend our work day. Don't tell the guys that. And the other thing we can do is our board is a board of 15 volunteers. We've got some really fantastic folks on the board, and getting their input by having them remote into the station and give us their observations about the equipment, the operating environment, and so forth. All of that is something that, I'm really passionate about.
So projects that, because of all of your work there, that you've kind of had to put to the side that you would love to get to work on personally, what is it? I've got several things that I'm constantly like, I need to get to that. I'd love to get to that. What are yours?
Well, the difficulty of living in temporary housing holds that back, right? So I continue to work on the Raspberry Pi Node Red stuff for personal interest, right, and enjoyment. But once we move into our house in the spring, believe you me, job one is to get a tower or towers up, and there's plenty of folks. In fact, there's a great friend of mine from Europe on Facebook who desperately wants to come over and put up a rotating 200-foot tower in my backyard. That's probably not in the cards, but somewhere in between 50 and 200 feet, it'd be great to get a tower up.
So we've got several YouTubers up Connecticut way, so put the call out. I'm sure one or two of them would be more than willing to come help you out.
Well, that's true, and we've already had we've got a great relationship with Rob, N1NUG.
Yeah, he's in
right?
the chat.
Okay, great. He's a fantastic guy. He's in the neighborhood. I know that he's been working with Becky on a fox hunting sort of primer for On the Air. But it's fabulous having him nearby. He's a great guy.
He is a good dude. In fact, you had mentioned earlier buying that first receiver that was dead as a hammer, and I think it was Rob during the YouTubers Hamfest that had the stream about tips for buying used equipment. So before you go, Hamfest shopping, you might want to go check that out. So, all right. So here's the question. I've always wanted to operate W1AW. I'm assuming by now you have.
Well, so since I've come in as CEO, I have to be completely honest with you. I have had time to do nothing in W1AW or W1HQ. I haven't made one contact. The only time that I've spent in W1AW is we've got a fantastic guy who is responsible for W1AW, the bulletins, and all the rest of that. And so I went over to see Joe and say to him, basically, I know COVID's been tough. I know there have been no visitors. I know it's sort of a lonely existence over here, but basically, thanks for everything you do. And now Joe is very active in our W1HQ project. And in fact, his project this week was, we have one of the two towers up on the roof of headquarters suffered, I would just say, fatigue, and was running the risk of not standing tall anymore. So we had Matt KC1XX come down and take all the Yagis off the tower, because I don't know what the weather is like down in Mississippi, but here in Connecticut tonight, we're expecting somewhere between 12 and 18 inches of snow with heavy winds. So getting those antennas down was job one, and Joe did a great job.
So we had about 27 flurries this morning at 8 o'clock.
Were those at Dairy Queen, or are we talking?
No, these are real snow flurries. In fact,
right.
I was at work today, and today was a virtual day for students. So basically, I was answering email questions as they came in, and another teacher who got licensed last year with my Padawans and whatnot he and I were working on some other radio stuff in the meantime. So when we walked out to the truck, all of a sudden it's like, that's snow. And so, yeah, we had 27 flurries. Of course, everybody ran outside to video, and they're like, wow, look, it's snowing. And it's like, it's 27 flurries. But so, all right. So obviously you like CW. You know, what's the big draw? I mean, you've kind of mentioned a few times, you know, the being able to listen around the world, but what is it that you truly love about working CW? I guess it's one of those things that a lot of people say that they're trying to learn again, you know, and I've got my Padawans learning it.
Sure. Well, there's two things. The first one is, you know, again, I think if it's something that you can find a comfort level for and a passion for early on, it's something that sort of stays with you, you know, for the rest of your amateur career. And you know, it's a very efficient mode. You're able to use very, very tight filters. You know, I've always loved the fact that, like, on 160 meters, I could have a relatively mediocre antenna, but could really dial down, you know, to like 110 hertz filter and just grind out that DX station. You know, another aspect of CW, and I actually brought a couple of examples tonight, is, you know, for me, it's the history of CW, and it's our heritage. It's sort of where the hobby began. But like, I have a, let me see if I can do this without screwing up the
which
screen.
Is kind of segueing into the next question is, you know, word on the street is you collect keys and bugs. So
yeah, I'm not doing a very good job with this, but anyway, this is a vibraplex from the early 1900s, you know, and I like to believe that this key at one point in time sent important messages, maybe even one about the Titanic. But if you look at what the vibraplex as a tool represented to people that were sending not just amateur messages, but commercial messages, you know, people in the early 1900s were suffering from glass wrist, which today we call carpal tunnel syndrome. And it was destroying people's careers. Once they developed glass wrist, their ability to send CW was really, you know, deteriorating, almost to the point of losing their jobs. And so this idea of sending this way, putting pressure on your wrist, to just swiping back and forth, and being able to use weights and springs to partially automate. So you could automate the DITs. You'd have to make the DAWs manually. But that semi-automatic production of Morse code did two things. First of all, it helped all of these operators to be able to send Morse code. But the second thing is that, you know, it was a little bit like going from dial-up with a modem to cable modems. All of a sudden, this relatively slow CW, these guys were flying with these bugs, being able to send a lot more messages and, as a result, make more money. So, so that represents a piece of history to me. It sits in my office at the league, and, you know, any visitors, and I've had, believe me, very few, but any visitors that come in that are willing to give me 90 seconds of time, I love to tell the story, because that to me is real. It's the birth of innovation in the way that we've used amateur radio over the decades. And what's really great about it is they're actually still making product. So the bug that I use, which looks similar, but it's not a japanned base, it's actually a painted base. You know, this is my, you know, the bug. I'll probably use this bug for straight key night from W1AW. We're talking about putting W1AW on for straight key night. And it's got this weight, this Vera arm weight on it, to be able to slow the code down so that people that are sending with a straight key, or maybe they're not that strong with CW, we don't blow them out of the water.
That would be me. You'd have to slow it down a lot.
Oh, that's
So.
okay. Happy to.
But very cool. So, where do you see amateur radio going in the future? You know, I know it's one of those questions people are asking. People are wondering, because obviously where you see it going is going to guide a lot of other things. So, what do you see in the future of ham radio?
Well, to me, the sort of the platform that I ran on to come in as CEO to ARRL is a digital transformation. Certainly analog is critical. The world is still hungering for analog engineers. It's an important technology. We continue to improve filtering, DSP filtering of analog signals. But really, when you look at sort of the future, you're seeing it in SDR radios. You're seeing it in digital modes like FT4, FT8, JS8 call, which is a fascinating application of FT8 technology. And it's enabling things that more common people weren't able to do. If you go back into some older antenna handbooks or ARRL handbooks, and you take a look at EME, I always remember there was an array that I think it was W5UN had. And this whole array was just like 64 Yagis that was turned by a truck engine on an arm. And this thing would just drive around in a circle to turn this massive array. Well, you don't need to do that to work the moon today. And a lot of it has to do with the digital technology that's there. When you look at HTs, the fact that, we're going from just straight up FM going into things like, DMR and fusion and all the like. The fact that you've got people that live in areas where they don't have a repeater. My favorite example is we had a group of Italians come to PJ4G on Bonaire. And one of the guys pulled out one of these hotspots, plugged it into our network, pulls out his HT, and he's sitting there talking to all of his buddies, back in Sicily. And I hadn't seen it before. And, for somebody to say, oh, that's not real ham radio. Really? It looked like ham radio innovation to me. It's not something necessarily that I've gotten into, but, I just see, all of these digital applications, expanding. And I'm also a big believer in remote radio. I think that it gives people an opportunity. I'll tell you a favorite story is Craig K9CT. He's got an absolutely gorgeous station out in the Midwest, right? Absolutely beautiful. The place was loaded with Elecraft K3s. He pulled all of the K3s out, put in all flex radios that were network ready, bought a bunch of these Maestros. And for contest season, his guys have these Maestros at home. They can network in so that if, like tonight, there's 12 to 18 inches of snow coming in, he doesn't have to worry about staffing his station. His station will be staffed and they'll be able to operate as a multi-operator team. So, to me, that enablement is like miraculous. So that's where I see amateur radio going. It's a lot more clever application of digital technologies.
Now you mentioned earlier, and I know if we're getting short on time, just let me know. But you mentioned earlier satellites, and you love working satellites, and that's something Jerica, my daughter, and I have kind of started to tinker with a bit. So talk about that. How'd you get interested in satellites, and what are you doing with it? Just trying to hit the bird and communicate? I mean, that's...
So there's a couple of things. So I got started with the Russian satellites back in the 80s because you only needed 10 and 15 meter radios or capabilities to be able to work the satellites. The other thing that was very cool about the Russian satellite was if nobody was on the bird, it had a robot. You could work the robot and it would give you a signal report back, which was, I thought, very, very cool. I was very excited about AO40. And I mean, I was really heartbroken and demoralized by what happened with AO40. And frankly, I took a hiatus from ham radio for a while because of it. It was just, I had built an enormous station at home, long boom antennas, a big dish, bought all kinds of equipment, a 736R, an 847, 2 meters up to 1.2 gig, all ready to rock. The satellite comes on. It is just amazing. And then boom, the thing's gone. Today, because rides into space are so rare and so expensive, for amateur projects, unfortunately, the projects, the satellites tend to be low Earth orbiting. They tend to be FM. There are linear ones, don't get me wrong, but the more popular ones tend to be FM. Because they're low Earth orbiting, I have 49 states on satellite with almost no hope of ever working Hawaii. And it just sort of drove me crazy to see Elon Musk take one of his cars with with a dummy and some David Bowie tunes and launch the thing out into space and just throw it out towards Mars. I was like, why didn't we have another AO40 in the passenger seat? The guy could have pulled a James Bond and just left it in orbit as he was headed out to Mars. But no, I take a lot of criticism from the community because I refuse to give up on a high Earth orbiting satellite for North America. I think we need it. I wish we had one. So what excites me about satellites today is it turns out that there is an award for 6 meters where you can work the 488, I think it's 488 grids that cover the domestic United States. And satellite operators have adopted that model. And so I've got a little over 300 grids towards that. Of course, now moving to Connecticut, I got to restart the whole game, right? Which is fine. It's actually puts me a little closer to Europe so I can work some more DX on the satellites. But, that's really one aspect. The other thing that I love to do is I've now activated Bonaire PJ4. I've spoken to the Hudson Division Director, Ria, who is connected to the United Nations station. So I'm hoping that this coming spring, I get an opportunity to go there. It'll be a modest station, but to be able to put 4 United Nations on satellite for the guys. Because I think for a lot of people, it's going to be a new country. And, the other thing I like to do is I like to travel to grids that are less populated. My friend Bennett, KO20K, he and I went down to Delaware a couple years ago and found a location on Google Earth right on the border of Fox Mike 28 and 29. And if you needed Delaware, you got Delaware. If you had Delaware, chances were you didn't have FM 28. So we were able to give guys a lot of new ones on satellite, and that was a lot of fun. So those are some of the things that I love about satellite right now.
So, and you mentioned Rhea, I'll go and tell you, she's got a ham radio YouTube channel out there too. So
she does. Rhea's very, very prolific. She's a big believer in education, a big believer in youth. You'll read in my next column about inclusion. And Rhea is very, very big on making sure that, for example, young women are coming into the hobby. So she is a very prolific, sort of activator for the community to get people educated and get them online.
So yeah,
she's also very big on SDRs. She loves that.
So yeah, if you have not gone over to her channel, look her up and make sure y'all subscribe to her. So,
N2 Radio Japan.
Yep. So, so that about wraps up the questions I have. If you've got anything you want to kind of add, couple
Steve, we
people have
could
asked
sit here
questions.
for
Yeah.
we could sit here for hours and talk about all the stuff that's going on at the league, some of which you're, very close to. But yeah, there's an awful lot of good stuff going on at the league.
And,
My first column talked about a culture of yes. And so what I've done is gone into the league and basically turned all the energy controls all the way up to 10. So really trying to drive a passion and excitement, drive up the quality level of what we do. We did an assortment planning process last week where we went through nearly 100 publications to try to figure out not just what our best sellers are, which we know, how do we manage the long tail? And then how do we look for the white space in our assortment? What are the titles that are missing? So one of the things that you're going to see us moving towards is a whole new series of books under the brand of On the Air, which will be introductory to sort of medium skill level books on many different aspects of amateur radio.
So great. I will throw out there Ham Radio TV. He's got another YouTube channel. He's actually interviewing his section manager, Jim W6LK, tonight on his show shortly after this one. So we're about to wrap it up. And Ham Radio TV, if I'm not mistaken, you've got an hour and 9 minutes before yours kicks off. So y'all out there, make sure you hit his up as well. And David, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I know that there are going to be some other streams and stuff coming up at some point where some of those questions, some people were asking questions that were very policy-based decisions or discussions that those are for another day. Today was just a day to kind of get to know you as a ham, which I thought was really cool. In fact, a couple of people have commented in there that, this guy really hams. So ham harder because
it's not a term that I find endearing, but at the league they call them hammy hams.
So but I know myself, I appreciate that you've done so much out there with ham radio, and hope that we can keep moving the league forward and getting things taken care of. So guys, we appreciate it. Dan Burak's in there. He says hashtag ham harder. That's kind of our little phrase there is ham harder. So I appreciate y'all being here, and y'all, any other questions or anything, if y'all drop them in the comments below, I'll be more than happy to forward some of those on. And that's it. So I hope to see you.
And go check out my Facebook page.
That's true. You said that. I need to, hang on. Let me drag that over there real quick because this is his league Facebook page. Now, they can't see you right now because I dragged it in the front. But if you go to Facebook and just look for David, NA2AA, you can find his Facebook page there, and go ahead and follow him. I don't Facebook much, but however you follow or like or whatever there, go ahead and hit that up because that's your official kind of page out there, right?
Yeah, I put it there so that I could send things to the members related to the league that I would think they'd find interesting. Not many of them have found that page yet, so I've just been putting some posts up there out of, whatever, just general interest. But in the fullness of time, there'll be a lot more content on there.
So, very cool. Well, once again, it was good having you. And y'all out there, thanks for being here.